guys. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Bold Effect podcast. I am your host, Mamadou Diallo. Let me introduce you to this podcast. The reason I call it the Bold Effect, this is the podcast where I'll come and sit down and just be myself. Have my coffee. I'm an absolute coffee addict and talk about things that I'm passionate about, right? Not necessarily just real estate, but a lot of different topics that I'm really, really passionate about and strictly be myself and don't necessarily care about being judged, what to think about me. Absolutely don't care. And I'll also be absolutely bringing guests that will talk about their experiences or their entrepreneurial journey, a lot of different topics. So it's not just going to be about investing. It's going to be about society. It's going to be about, spirituality. It's going to be about a lot of different things. And sometimes I'll just sit here because I love talking. I'm just going to ramble and talk about my life experience. And today's morning, I'm about to have coffee with you guys and actually talk about a great man, okay? A great man, which is my dad. And I'm gonna call this episode, I'm gonna call it It All Starts at Home, right? It all starts at home. Let me show you guys something, right? I don't know if you can see this picture. This is my dad right here in the middle. You can see him here in the middle, and he's the whole crowd. He's surrounded by a big crowd. This picture don't even reflect the amount of people surrounding him, and he's standing in the middle with you would call it maybe a can, talking to the crowd. Now, why do I want to talk about today that things starts at home? I'm a dad of two. I'm a dad of two daughters. My youngest right now is about to turn 1 year old. And I'm observing this child and I'm noticing that at this young months, it's not even age, right? They pick up every single little thing. When I say every single little thing, they pick up the way you smile, they try to mimic it. They pick up the way you play with them, they try to mimic it. They pick up the noises you make, they try to mimic it. I observe my daughter literally if I'm playing with her and she's holding and I'm taking her, I take her toy from her hands and I hide it, right? And I'm playing with her. If I give her back the toy, she will try to hide it back from me. Literally mimic everything. And this made me reflect a little bit and it goes back full circle. Why is that? Now I'm talking to the dads right now. I don't know what it is to feel uh up to be a mom, but one thing I can say is that women are superheroes, right? But I don't know what it is to feel like I lost my mom at the age of 7. I was turning 7. So I here specifically because I'm a dad, I'm speaking to the dads specifically, right? Here's what I mean by everything starts at home. Kids pick up if you're lazy, and so they go through life thinking that's a norm. If you're a lazy parent, always sitting in front of the TV, watching TV all day, well, they pick up every single little thing, right? So they pick up whatever you're watching. Are you always just singing, dancing? Are you rude? It doesn't matter. They pick up every single little thing. And so they go through life thinking those things are normal, right? I think the biggest programming actually happens at home. And I can relate this back to my story. So, like I just said, I lost my mom at the age of 7. When she passed away, I was 7. I have 12 siblings, right? I think at the time 13, we lost one, so 12. Actually, we lost two, so I think now we're 11, right? So, but my dad, I left him also at the age of 8. I was turning 8 when I left my dad. So my mom passed. I only lived with my family for about a year after that. Then I left, right? I'm not gonna go through the whole story of why did I leave, how I left. But one thing for sure, mind you, I said I left my dad at the age of 8. At the age of 8. And now that I'm over my 30s, I reflect back to every single little thing. Like I'm just watching myself and certain things, like for example, hard work. The discipline that my dad taught us as kids is you wake up in the morning, soon as you start talking, even maybe before, I don't, but as far as I can remember, which I think based on some research that I did is children remember from the age of 3, I think, like very vivid memory, right? But since the age I can remember, my dad's discipline is very simple. I've watched this man wake up the same time every single day, which is the latest I've ever saw my dad wake up is at 4 a.m. the whole years I've lived with him. So I left him at the age of 8, and I only saw him when I was over my 20s. Right? I grew up in a refugee camp, and that's another story for another day. But I've watched this man get up at the age of 4, at the time 4 a.m. every single morning. Here's the discipline: pray, read, teach, and then after he's done with that, community work. That's all I've saw my dad do. Right now, as a child, you just go through life, you watch it, you don't even know that you're picking up habits. You don't know, right? And you as a parent also sometimes, like, you do things without knowing that you're actually teaching your child something, and they're just picking this up, and it will come back to them later in life, and it will actually also program them and behave a certain way subconsciously. Right? Subconsciously, you're ingraining certain values and beliefs in them without knowing. That's why you want to make sure whatever they observe at home is positive. Don't be at home watching TV all day saying I'm spending time with my family. No, you're teaching your child laziness. That's what you're doing. You're teaching your kid laziness. That's what you're doing, right? So my dad used to allow us to go play. So I'm not here to talk about my sad childhood. My childhood was absolutely not sad. To the contrary, actually, I would say, because when I was a kid, man, we would go play soccer. Like right now, I observe kids and I feel sorry for them. We would go outside, play soccer, no phones. I remember as a kid, we used to like literally make toys out of nothing, right? We would make trucks out of milk cans, guys. Literally, that's what I played with. We would take like big truck tires, put oil in it, grab 2 wood sticks, and drive it all over the neighborhood. That's how I played when I was a child. So I used to play a lot. But in the morning, the discipline with my dad, even as a child, was you get up, you pray, you read, and then after that, you teach somebody else that is one page behind you. Right? We're Muslims, so we used to read the Quran, right? Doesn't matter what you're reading in the morning, but the discipline, I'm talking about the discipline. Here, the thing is the discipline. So even when I left so the discipline was that, number one. Number two, respect your parents. Number three, respect your older brothers, right? There was no democracy in my household. You don't try to negotiate with my dad. You don't negotiate with parents, okay? My dad have this, he had such a, like, my dad will give you a look, and his eyes will tell you everything he meant. He doesn't argue. Get it done, right? And if my dad was out, guess what? My older brothers are the ones that pick up the torch. So you don't just get to do whatever. So that we kept that discipline. Now, as a child, you just go through life. You don't know, right? You don't know if you don't know if you're learning. You're just living. But mind you, I left them at the age of 8. I left my dad, went to another country, spent 1 year. This is in Ivory Coast. Then a political war broke out. Then I ended up in Belgium in a refugee camp. When I arrived at the refugee camp, I was turning 9 or 10, if I remember well. I was turning 9 or 10. And I remember arriving at this refugee camp, and I was the only child from, first of all, from a French country. Then I ended up in Belgium in a small town where they only speak Netherlands. Guys, this is funny, right? When I was back in Guinea, when I used to live with my parents, I used to think, I think it's because we're being colonized by the French. I used to think, no joke, that every white person speak French. Every white person, because every movie I've ever saw, every TV show I've ever saw, every white man we've ever encountered back home as kids, they spoke French, right? So when I arrived in Belgium, I expected every white person to speak French. So when I arrived and they told me to go to this little refugee camp, gave me like a little map, then I had to find my way to the train station, then grab a train, then go to that little town called Sint-Truiden. That's what it's called. Sint-Truiden, they speak Netherlands. They speak Netherlands. Like in Belgium, they have 3 different communities, which is some people speak French, some people speak Dutch, some people speak, Netherlands, right? So here I'm talking about Netherlands, right? The way they say hi, guys, is goedendag. Goedendag, hoe gaat het met u? right? So can you imagine at 9, 10 years old, I've never, I arrived in St. Croix at the train station, and then I guess the social worker that came to pick me, I'll never forget his name. His name was Steven. He came to pick me up, and he came with somebody else to translate, somebody that is from Ivory Coast that speaks my language. It was a lady, I forgot her name. And he started talking, and I was like, hold on. What did he just say? He sounded like a bird. He's all I could hear is quack, 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 quack. I'm like, what the heck is this language? I thought everywhere. Let me grab a sip of coffee. So you see how you can be programmed, right? How you can be programmed. So discipline, I didn't know was ingrained in me by my dad. I didn't know. I was just going through life. Respect for your elders, respect for your older brothers, right? My family, we're all born in the same household, so I grew up in a big family. We all played together. Like my childhood is amazing, was amazing. So, my story. I'm not here for, don't feel sorry for me. Like actually my childhood made me who I am, and also the way I grew up, even in this refugee camp, which I'm not going to go over the whole story here because you won't listen to it, right? It's going to be too long for you, right? But here's my point is, the biggest programming, now that I reflect back, the biggest programming you will ever get is as a child. You're just picking up everything without even knowing it. And certain things just catch up to you when you're an adult, especially as a man when you reach that age of 30, when you're becoming a little bit wiser and over your 30s. For some reason, for most people, you start circling back after you go through like puberty, and then you go through your whole, want to be out there, do whatever, clubbing, whatever you want to do, right? But over your 30s, you start being a little wiser. And for some reason, you revert back to those kind of like, if they're good values, you revert back to those childhood core values that you've been taught by a present parent. See, my dad, here's one thing about my dad, right? Why this is a great man. My dad is, he was probably the most physically absent, but at the same time, he was the most physically present. And I'll tell you what I mean. Like I said, beside the discipline, my dad have always been like a social activist. I would call him, and a religious leader. So when my dad wakes up in the morning, his focus is on helping other people. Every single day, I've watched this man go from town to town, neighborhood to neighborhood. People come into our house, door is always open, right? Giving charity. My dad would play with us, but like maybe 2, 3 hours. But after that, if my dad is taking me anywhere, guess where he was taking me, putting me on his lap? He's taking me to villages where he's sitting in front of crowds, giving talks, right? In front of crowds, giving lectures. And I was sitting on his lap. I didn't know I was sucking up all this knowledge, not only the knowledge, but I was sucking up all this discipline. I was sucking up all this behavior. I was sucking up all this wisdom. So when I arrived at the refugee camp, guys, or outside of me thinking that every white person speaks French, right, is one thing that they noticed really quick about me, even at the age of 10, is that I was way more disciplined than most kids that was there. So I was way wiser for my age. And how do I know this? Because these adults actually used to tell me, my social workers, the refugee camp, they gave me a godmother to take me out on the weekend, take me shopping. I love her. Her name is Marlene Bakers. If you're watching this, Marlene, I love you. Thank you for taking care of me and caring for me as if I was your own. That woman really, like, she did a lot for me at that refugee camp. But that's beside the point. The point is, they all noticed that I was very mature for my age. I was not like every other kid and all I want to do is kid stuff, right? Where did I pick up that? Now that I think back, I picked it up from my dad. The discipline: wake up, read, teach, go to school, respect your older brothers. If I'm not there, and if I tell you do, you do. There is no negotiations. Never. There is no way you negotiated with my dad. And I didn't even know, right? So, and I remember some of my older brothers, if an old person tells you as a kid. Like I remember a specific scene where um one of my aunties, I think, but she's on the older side. She asked me to go bring her water, and I don't know what I said, but I responded rudely. I think as a child, one of my older brothers, he grabbed me. The way he grabbed me and the lesson he taught me that day, I have never said no to an elderly person again rudely. Never. Right? Right nowadays, 20 this is 2023. I observe these teenagers and kids as absolute zero discipline, absolute zero respect, absolute nothing, no brains whatsoever. Anyway, so going to that refugee camp, even as a child, growing up by myself, because here's if you've never been at the refugee camp, here's how it works. You really don't have anybody telling you do or don't. The only thing they care about is you get up in the morning, if you go to school and you leave the camp and come back before, I think it was 6 p.m. You have like, they give you a number with a badge, right? So you have to scan it at the freaking gate. The gate is like a green, freaking looks like a jail cell, to be honest with you. If I show you the picture, it looks like my refugee camp was Bevingen, right? So with that being said, nobody really tells you do or don't as long as you go to school. Now, me, even at that age, now I didn't know what I was doing, but when they asked me, do you want to go to a French school or go to a Netherlands school? Guess what I picked? I had the choice. A lot of the kids that I grew up with, same age at that refugee camp, and we're all now over our 30s, which I still speak to some of them today, they picked French because that's what they knew. Me, I don't know why. In my head, I'm like, oh, I already know French, kind of, not really, but kind of, I speak that like African French at the time, which is fine. But I want to learn the language. I want to learn the local language so that I can understand what people say. I don't know. That's how I thought about it in my head. So I just chose Netherlands. So started going to Netherlands school. And all we were learning at that school was Netherlands, obviously, right? But with my free time now, when I was at this refugee camp, guys, I'm keeping a long story short. I'm not explaining to you why yet. At least I'm gonna do another episode on that. Why did I end up in a refugee camp? It's a whole complicated story. My dad had a lot of kids, but my dad is the greatest. He's my superhero. Okay, so don't feel sorry for me for growing up in the refugee camp. Plus, I believe everything in life happens for a reason. God has plans for everybody. So I am who I am today because I grew up at that refugee camp. I've learned so much. Grew up with all kind of different nationalities, from Arab countries to other different African countries, different ethnicities, Asia. Like kids from all over the world. All these kids became my brothers, sisters, right? Learning different cultures, understanding that is because I'm Fulani, I'm from Guinea Fulani, right? So there's not only Fulanis out here in the world. And here's another discipline that I picked up. One thing that we did have in this camp was free time. There's nothing to do. You wake up, you go to school 4 or 5 hours, you learn in Dutch, Netherlands, then you come back at the camp, then everybody gotta go eat together, blah blah blah. There's nothing to do. Boredom daily. You can be in your room, so everybody share one room, right? So it's always at least two people in one room. I used to share my room with I think his name is Bienvenu from Cameroon, I think. I started sharing my room with somebody else, then Bienvenu came. That's the only guy I remember. I don't remember the first one, but regardless, there was too much free time. Too much free time. What did I decide to do, guys? One day, I don't know if I was watching a movie or I was watching TV, but I landed on either a show or a music video where they were talking in English, and I just fell in love with the language. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna learn this language. And what I decided to do, guys, by myself, my free time, I would go to a freaking bookstore and pick up comic books and try to read it by myself and translate it into French. Right. Then I started with one of the first words I've ever learned in English was "you eat too much" from an Asian guy from an Asian kid in the camp. He was from Tibet. And he said, "You eat too much." That's the first thing he taught me because he thought that I ate too much. I'm always like, when it's food, I'm there, right? But I've used my free time. And so from the age, I've stayed in this refugee camp from the age of 10 to when I was like 16 and a half, going 17. Then they let me out to go live by myself, right? So it took me what, maybe like a year or two to really like start fluently speaking English. And every single day, my goal was to learn 4 sentences in English. And what I would do is I would take like a blank page. I will find 4 sentences, write it down, translate it in French, and then I'll tape it on my wall in my room. And Bienvenue used to ask me all the time, like, why are you doing this? I want to learn the language, right? Where did I pick up that discipline? I don't know. But now, if I have to guess, I would say home. Because all the other kids, guess what they were doing? A lot of them, at least 99.9% of them, party, going trying different drugs here and there, hanging out with the wrong people from that small town, right? It's boredom. Like boredom will make you do the worst things if you don't turn the boredom into a productive activity. I honestly didn't know what I was doing, to be honest with you guys. But I just knew, you know what? I have so much time, nothing to do anyway. Why not? So my English that I'm speaking to you guys right now is self-taught. I learned this in that refugee camp. Even my older brothers who have been in the US forever came here, university, finished school. When I was in Belgium, they were surprised. How are you speaking English? How did you learn English? It's the discipline. It's the discipline that I picked up from my dad that helped me. And I used to talk with my dad every single Sunday. He would force me to call him every single Sunday, same time, 2 p.m. And guess when I call him, what do we talk about? One is patience, right? This is why I said he was the most physically absent, but the most physically present too. Because 1 hour virtually with my dad was worth 24-hour presence from most men I know. Just the wisdom that he used to put in me. One is patience. He used to always tell me, be patient, be patient, be patient. Remember, patience is a virtue, right? Because obviously, as a child, you're sad. You don't know why you're here. Why are you growing up by yourself? There's so many questions, so much anger, frustration, doesn't matter. But he's like, just go through it. This is your journey. Be patient, whatever. So he would just give me a lot of wisdom. But most importantly, he wanted to make sure that I don't forget the language, which is Fulani. So we would talk in Fulani, right? Because he knew I wasn't around Fulani. So we would talk in Fulani. So he wanted to make sure that I don't forget the language, right? What is my point with all this? My main point is, guys, everything starts at home. Now that I'm over my 30s, I have 2 daughters. I'm starting to see even my youngest, that is not even 1 year old, how the kids pick up every single little thing. And if my dad had taught me laziness, guess what I would be today? Most likely super lazy. Now, I'm not saying there is not one individual out there out of 99 people that their parents or their family taught them the wrong things, then they flip it and turn it into positive. I'm just saying, like, if you take over all, let's say on the macro level, right? Not on the micro level, on the on the macro level. If you look at it, family is the biggest influence. That's where it starts. If you have one. If you don't, some people, they join gangs or whatever the case may be, and those become the family, and they start picking up that, right? But in any way, shape, or form, typically, whatever you call family, that's where the biggest indoctrination or programming or brainwashing plays a role. So if you're a parent, as a man, make sure that you pay attention to every single little day-to-day teachings that you convey to your kids, because it's not what you say, is what you do. They're watching. So if your kids see you every single day, not complaining, going out doing the work, giving charity, caring about other people, reading, whatever the case may be, like positive stuff, guess what? This is being ingrained in them. Even if they go through their journey and make their mistakes, when they start reaching that age where they're a little bit more wiser, I'm telling you, those core values comes back, and I'm the product of it. I am absolutely the product of it, right? Um, so I don't know. I was just thinking about it, and I wanted to get it out of my system. Everything starts at home. Every single little thing. Be very mindful what you teach your kids. Be very mindful how you behave around your kids. They pick up everything. Now, it doesn't mean nobody's perfect. I'm just saying, like in general, because I see nowadays there is this conversation. There's a lot of men out there saying, "Hey, they can barely afford the rent, but they're home all day with their kids, watching what? Netflix. I'm spending time with my kid." Okay, how many hours can you really sit down with your child and watch Netflix? Is 2 hours not enough? Is 3 hours not enough? Right? What are you teaching them? Any discipline? Any like what are you teaching them? Laziness? Are you also going through life just complaining, blaming everybody else? So guys, everything starts at home. Every single little thing starts at home. And with that being said, another sip of coffee. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Be mindful how you behave home. And until next time, guys, stay bold and be bold.